Good morning, dear listeners. I am your speaker, Chen Ming, and today, Group Force Podcast presents to you our topic, a substantial time in Vietnam. But before we begin, did you know that there once existed these things called voucher stamps? What, you didn't? Well, these voucher stamps were produced during what was called the Doi Moi era. I believe everyone has heard of the term, but not much about what happened then in detail. During this period, food, goods, and services were purchased with coupons or food stamps like these. So, when, why, and what is Doi Moi are the questions we will answer today. But first, let's take a look at the situation from the inside of Vietnam. Before 1986, Vietnam had enormous economic difficulties and an untimely economic crisis. Furthermore, the outside world didn't do it much favor either, with aid and trade from outside powers significantly reduced, paired with sanctions by the US after its invasion. Thus, in the Sixth Congress of the Communist Party of Vietnam, which happened on December of 1986, the Doi Moi Plan was introduced. The term Doi Moi signifies the economic reforms adopted by our government in the 1980s. Now that we learned of its origin, my friend Chen Mai will continue with its main content.
Okay, thanks Chen Ming. Chen Mai everyone, and now I will talk about the main contents of the Doi Moi plan regarding the economic sphere, which includes the economic structure transformation, agriculture development, and the exports growth. Well, first of all, before Doi Moi, Vietnam's economy was centrally controlled, with the state dictating the production, pricing, and distribution, and this led to inefficiencies and a lack of motivation for improvement because individuals had little decision making power and no stake in the outcomes. So, in 1986, the Doi Moi Plan initiated a shift towards a market oriented economy. This means that the state will reduce its control by ending the subsidies for state-owned enterprises and allowing market forces to influence the prices. And this move helped to foster autonomy, accountability, and a closer alignment with global market prices. And this action resulted in positive outcomes. To be specific, these reforms curbed the budget deficit from 12% of GDP in 1989, I mean the year before Doi Moi Plan, to 8% in 1989, 3 years after Doi Moi. And regarding GDP, the year 1989 witnessed a cheaper increase from 2.4% in 1986 to 7.4%. The second goal of the Doi Moi Plan was to boost agriculture and exports. So the reason for this was that from 1976 to 1981, Vietnam faced food shortages, leading to imports to meet demand. So in 1986, land reforms which transferred the ownership from collective to private, incentivized the farmers, and transformed Vietnam into a rice exporting country. With exports of 1.4 million tons in 1989 and 4.7 million tons in 2008, ranking second globally. So, as you can see, the Doi Moi Plan has been pivotal in transforming Vietnam's economy into a dynamic, market-driven environment, leading to sustained growth and stability. Next, Chen Lan will tell you about the changes in Vietnam's diplomacy during the Doi Moi Plan.
Hello everyone, I'm Trần Loan, and now I will talk about the Vietnam situation before Doi Mới. From the 1975 to 1985, Vietnam foreign policy focused on political diplomacy and is heavily influenced by ideology, which is socialism. To illustrate, at the Fifth Congress in 1982, tightening and expanding cooperative relations with socialist countries is the top issue in foreign policy. However, by the mid-1980s, the development of modern Vietnam had borrowed from the former Soviet Union, and its European allies have revealed numerous flaws and were proving outmoded. Moreover, it had become ever more dependent on the Soviet Union for political support, economics, and military assistance. On the political and diplomatic front, tense relations with China due to the sovereignty issue in Hoàng Sa, the heavy burden of Vietnam troops present in Cambodia, and strict sanctions imposed by the U.S. Placed Vietnam in a difficult bind. On the other hand, the country was blocked from cultivating new relations with other countries. So, for the sake of the country's survival, Vietnam leaders were forced to adopt political reform or Doi Moi. So, what changes were made during Doi Moi? So, I will invite Nguyễn Mai to continue.
Thank you, Trần for your information. Well, after Doi Moi, Vietnam foreign policy is not heavily influenced by ideology anymore and had a breakthrough orientation change. To elaborate, at the Seventh Congress in 1991, the policy aimed to cooperate with countries that have different political regimes for mutual benefits. Our principle at that time it was peaceful coexistence, and the motto is Vietnam wants to be friends with all countries. Now we can see that Vietnam did not only focus on strengthening relationships with neighbor countries, but also with developed countries. So the ideological foreign policy in the past changed to an independent and self-reliant foreign policy, expanding cooperative relations with other countries with different ideologies. And this helped Vietnam to cope with the world change, for instance, the socialism crisis, and also normalize relations with other countries. For example, Vietnam normalized relations with China in 1991 and established comprehensive strategic cooperative partnership with China in 2008. And after Doi Moi, Vietnam also established diplomatic ties with the US in 1995. This also opened up opportunities for Vietnam to establish new diplomatic ties, deepen its relations with many other countries, and join various regional and multilateral institutions. Furthermore, under Doi Moi, Vietnam is firmly committed to being on friendly terms with all countries, and up to now, Vietnam has diplomatic relations with 192 countries, including all major countries. Vietnam is also a friend and trusted partner of many countries in the international community, and also many organizations such as APEC, UN, WTO, ASEAN plus three. Now, let's moving on to the part of Haiyan.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining me today. I'm Hải Yến, and in this podcast, I would like to discuss two key challenges that Vietnam has faced since the Doi Moi reforms: environmental degradation and social inequality. First, let's talk about environmental degradation. Environmental degradation has worsened seen the Doi Moi reforms due to the intensification of agriculture and industrialization. In agriculture, the increased use of fertilizers and pesticides to boost yield of crops like rice and coffee, as well as in aquaculture, is harming soil health, water quality, and biodiversity. Meanwhile, rapid industrialization is generating severe pollution with manufacturing sector like textile, electronics that release toxic waste and untreated wastewater that contaminates soil and water resources. The second limitation I would like to share is about social inequality. Vietnam's economic growth since the Doi Moi reforms has been impressive, with extreme poverty dropping to just 3% according to the latest figures published by the World Bank 2016. However, income inequality is on the rise, and the gap between the super rich and the rest of the population is widening. With 1 in a million Vietnamese having assessed over $30 million in 2013. During the privatization of state-owned enterprises, corruption is another issue, with some of the super-rich believed to have used their connection with authorities and the party to secure position. Vietnam ranked 112 out of 168 countries on Transparent International's Corruption Perception Index in 2015, and enforcing anti-corruption laws continues to be a struggle. Despite progress, unequal opportunities for children, especially those from poor and ethnic minority backgrounds, remain a significant challenge. The kids are most likely to face malnutrition and have lower secondary school attendance rates compared to their peers. Alright, that's two key challenges that Vietnam has faced after Doi Moi reforms. Now, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Võ Nam, who will delve deeper into the conclusion. Okay, Võ Nam, the floor is yours.
And that brings us to the end of our podcast on the Doi Moi reforms introduced in 1986. I would like to extend a big thank you to Ian and the others for their impeccable delivery of today's podcast. Okay, now, so as we have discussed, Doi Moi marks a significant turning point for Vietnam. So, by shifting away from a strict government-controlled command economy towards a more open and liberal market system, Vietnam empowered its people with greater control over their land and assets, and opened their land up to like international trade. So this monumental change catalyzed economic growth, reducing poverty, and stabilizing inflation. Okay, so even more than that, though, it wasn't just about economic reforms. So it also transformed Vietnam's foreign policies, moving from a focus on its communist allies to fostering friendships globally. This included mending relations with China, shaking hands with the USA, and joining international organizations, all of which further spurred economic development. Well, of course, these successes come with their own set of challenges, like environmental pollution and the growing gap between the rich and the poor. Well, however, the impact of Doi Moi is unmistakable. So Vietnam's economy has been revitalized and the country has become more interconnected with the rest of the world. Moving forward, the key will be addressing these new issues while continuing to build upon the progress that has been made. Alright, that's it. Thank you all for listening. Now let's move on to our short Q&A session where we look forward to answer your questions and moving deeper into the topic. Okay, so feel free to ask, audience. Alright, now let's get started with the questions. So, who would like to go first? Okay, so I think that Mr. Chen Ming here will deliver the answer to the first set question. Okay, now Mr. Chen Ming.
Okay, welcome back to our podcast. And after some time receiving questions from our listeners, we have now received quite a few interesting questions. One of these is from our beloved Group 6. Do you have any suggestions to address the social limitations from the implementation of Doi Moi? Well, social limitations after Doi Moi is quite a complex issue even in the present day. But I think we can begin by investing more in public education and self-services, especially in disadvantaged areas to improve human capital and reduce inequality of opportunity for children from poor and ethnic and minority backgrounds. Yeah, let's help those kids out, right? Also, our government can implement policies that allow private companies and entrepreneurship to thrive, creating more opportunities for our people. Finally, for the stability of society, the law must be constantly updated, reinforced, and enforced. That is our answer for group 6. Now, Nam, do you have another question to answer for everyone?
Alright, thank you, Chen Ming, for your profound insight into the social limitations from the imitation Doi, which is quite a multifaceted issue that I don't think that a mere educated layman like you can even answer. Okay, now let's move on to another question posted by another audience. Okay, can you please explain more about the tense relations between Vietnam, China, and Cambodia? Okay, this is quite an interesting question, but unfortunately, it might not be within the scope of today's podcast. Okay, yeah, but well, we answer it anyway to provide more context for the tense relation between China and Vietnam, which might be directly related to the Doi Moi program. Okay. Now, so in 1978, the Khmer Rouge, the communist regime of Cambodia, backed by China, invaded Vietnam and caused a massacre. Okay, so Vietnam led a military interventions into Cambodia to protect itself and to free the Cambodians from the terror committed by the regime. Okay. However, China then was one of its staunchest allies, so this obviously infuriated China. So, in turn, China invaded Vietnam in 1979. Okay, and I think that is the source of the tense relations between the three countries that you mentioned. Okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Chenning, and that was a fantastic Q&A session. And thank you all for your insightful questions and for participating so actively. Now, before we sign off, I want to extend a big thanks once again to the rest of the team for their contributions today. So, the Doi Moi reforms have indeed shaped Vietnam's economic and political landscape in profound ways. It was great to deep dive into this topic with all of you. Okay, if you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback is incredibly valuable and helps us to reach more listeners like you. Also, don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram and email us with any thoughts, questions, or suggestions for future episodes. Stay curious, stay inspired, and we'll catch you next time on next episode. Okay? Thanks for tuning in. Bye for now.